student film.
I have been asking for weeks and weeks if I can read the script, and every time they're like, nope.
I didn't know that it was like a life or death situation. I think we all work too hard, and we should put our lives first.
Tom Holland has just called it quits with the Avengers, the very system that controlled, manipulated, and ultimately broke him. But what really happened behind Disney's closed doors? He's finally speaking out, and what he revealed about his time with Marvel might just change how you see the franchise forever. Tom Holland's break with Disney, the mask comes off. Disney abused me. That's the line that sparked a storm. It wasn't screamed from a headline or posted on Twitter. It wasn't clickbait. It was the unspoken message embedded between every uncomfortable laugh, every dodged question, every clipped interview where Tom Holland tried to speak and Marvel tried to silence him. It's not one quote. It's 1,000 moments, finally adding up to something undeniable. Tom Holland was not just Spider-Man. He was a prisoner in the MCU's golden cage, and now he's out.
And now that I've been afforded that power, I am struggling to figure out what is the right thing to do.
Let's start from the beginning. Holland was just a teenager when he first auditioned for Marvel. A bright-eyed, soft-spoken kid who couldn't believe his luck when he landed the role of a lifetime. The world saw a dream come true, but behind that fairy tale was a contract with invisible ink. Because from day one, Holland was expected not just to act, but to comply, to obey, to smile, to be perfect. And he did, for years, until he couldn't anymore. His story begins like so many others. A young actor thrust into global fame, made to carry a franchise, and treated like property. But it's what Marvel did after the cameras stopped rolling that makes this more than just another Hollywood burnout. This is the story of how Disney transformed a human being into a product and then punished him when he asked for space to breathe. They controlled what he said, what he wore, when he could speak, who stood next to him on press tours. They even censored his haircut.
So the studio were like, no, you can't cut your hair like that.
But it gets darker. They didn't just monitor him. They manipulated him, lied to him about filming scenes, restricted his access to scripts, painted him as immature, the kid who couldn't be trusted with secrets, when in reality, they were deliberately feeding him misinformation.
I showed up to the wedding.
Very somber wedding.
And I was like, where's Robert?
The most infuriating part? They laughed about it, publicly, repeatedly. They made his confusion a joke, turned his reputation into a meme, the spoiler king, the naive boy, the lovable liability. But that wasn't just bad PR, it was psychological warfare. And all the while, Holland was drowning in responsibilities no 19-year-old should ever carry. There were contracts, reshoots, secret cameos, studio interviews, fake plot lines, red carpet after red carpet, all while trying to stay on brand. Marvel didn't want an actor. They wanted a puppet. And when the strings started snapping, they blamed the puppet. Holland's breaking point wasn't one moment. It was a slow erosion, a burnout you could see on his face, if you were really looking. And now, he's finally telling his side. This expose isn't just about Holland's retreat from Disney. It's about what led to that retreat. The fake smiles, the media spin, the pressure to stay silent, the punishment for trying to take back control. It's about how the studio that made him a star also made him disappear from himself. This is more than a career decision. It's a cultural reckoning. Because if Marvel could do this to Holland, the most compliant, the most beloved, the most bankable face of the franchise, then who else is quietly suffering behind the scenes? And what does it say about the machine we keep fueling with every ticket we buy? And maybe, just maybe, you'll never look at the MCU the same way again. He's opening up about what it was really like to be Marvel's youngest A-lister. And if you think being Spider-Man is every kid's dream, think again. Because this dream came with a mental health collapse, contractual control, and surveillance-level censorship. That's what Tom Holland is now implying through years of breadcrumb interviews and a bombshell long-form conversation that set the internet ablaze. For years, he played Marvel's golden boy, but now he's naming names, dropping truth bombs, and making it very clear that he was not just overworked, he was emotionally manipulated.
Spider-Man of it all, that was the big turning point of where, like, everything changed.
From that turning point, Holland began to notice something disturbing. He didn't own his own story anymore. His days, his appearance, even his words, they all belonged to Disney.
And you're so recognizable as that character. So the studio were like, no, you can't cut your hair like that.
So what did Tom do? He walked into his trailer and cut his hair anyway. That one act of rebellion, it was a scandal. This wasn't just about a haircut. It was about a studio trying to freeze his identity in time. A kid forever. A perfect, photogenic Peter Parker. But Holland wasn't a kid anymore. And then there's this. They wouldn't let him read the scripts.
I actually know nothing about this movie. I'm not allowed to read the scripts because I'm so bad at keeping secrets.
Imagine being the lead actor in a billion-dollar film and not being allowed to read the script. That's not protection. That's infantilization. It gets darker. During a live appearance with the Spider-Man cast, Holland admitted, laughing but clearly disturbed, that he was told he'd be filming a wedding scene. When he arrived on set, it was actually Tony Stark's funeral.
This is how bad it is for me. I was told it was a wedding. No word of a lie. I showed
Very
up to
somber
the
event,
wedding,
very somber wedding.
and I was like, "Where's Robert?"
They didn't trust him, so they lied to him. This wasn't about protecting spoilers. This was about control and humiliation.
But anything that had spoilers in it was blacked out, so most of the script was blacked out.
It's clear, Marvel ran their actors like military intelligence assets, not creatives. And Holland, the most enthusiastic, loyal actor they had, was treated as a liability. But what's even more damning, Marvel made Holland a punchline. Time and time again, interviews were staged to make Holland the spoiler kid, the adorable fool. Even Benedict Cumberbatch was used as a babysitter, intercepting questions to prevent Holland from slipping up.
I have been asking for weeks and weeks if I can read the script, and every time they're like, "Nope, because you can't keep a secret."
He wasn't just being excluded from the process, he was being publicly embarrassed for it. And behind the smile, Holland was breaking. He kept laughing in interviews, he kept smiling on red carpets, but the cracks were growing beneath the surface. This wasn't just about stress, it was burnout weaponized. It was the psychological toll of knowing your own career had been reduced to a PR gimmick. He had become a brand mascot, not an artist. And the worst part, no one ever asked him if he was okay. The press was interested in spoilers, Marvel was interested in optics, the fans just wanted more Spider-Man. But the human behind the suit, he was disappearing. Tom Holland started to dread the very thing he once loved. Movie sets became anxiety chambers. Premiere nights became panic triggers. By the time he hit the press tour for No Way Home, he wasn't just tired, he was unrecognizable to himself. And then he made the boldest move of all. He stepped back. It was unheard of. The golden boy of Marvel disappearing of the grid. No teasers, no trailers, just silence. And that silence became his greatest statement. He wasn't rebelling, he was healing. He talked openly about stopping drinking, not because of scandal, but because he needed clarity.
I'm never going to drink again because this is the best version of myself.
He began journaling, spending more time with family, taking walks, not for fitness, but to feel something real again, something unbranded. This was the turning point. He realized that the version of himself Disney was selling wasn't the full story. It wasn't even his story. They owned Spider-Man, but they didn't own Tom Holland. And that's when he started saying no. No to press tours that ran 14 hours. No to having his interviews scripted. No to hiding his fatigue behind a rehearsed grin.
And now that I've been afforded that power, I am struggling to figure out what is the right thing to do.
He admitted that no was scary, that silence felt alien, that slowing down was uncomfortable. But for the rarest time in years, he felt free. And in that freedom, he found something that years of premieres and applause had never given him: peace. Tom Holland was a PR hostage, the silent war with Marvel Studios. Tom Holland wasn't just Spider-Man on camera. Behind the scenes, he had become Marvel's most valuable mascot, the crown jewel of a billion-dollar empire. But that crown came with chains. And in his own words, that pressure began to warp his life, his body, and his identity.
And now that I've been afforded that power, I am struggling to figure out what is the right thing to do.
When Holland started pushing back, the smiles faded, the tone changed. Suddenly, the same studio that had paraded him across press tours and Comic-Con panels began tightening the leash. And nowhere was that more obvious than in how Marvel orchestrated his public persona, turning every appearance into a performance and every interview into a test of obedience. Marvel didn't just coach their actors, they conditioned them.
I can see why you guys don't know what you can say and what.
Holland became a running joke, the spoiler prince, the liability, the adorable loudmouth who couldn't keep a secret. But this wasn't just an image problem, it was a power tactic. They handed him blacked out scripts, sent fake call sheets, lied about storylines.
Student film.
I have been asking for weeks and weeks if I can read the script, and every time they're like, "Nope."
They weren't just hiding spoilers, they were hiding the truth and using his confusion as entertainment. Think about that. Marvel was actively manufacturing situations where their lead actor would fail in public. That failure wasn't accidental, it was theater, a spectacle built into their marketing. Because every time Tom slipped, every time he made a public blunder, it became a viral moment. It boosted trailer views, generated memes, distracted the audience. He wasn't promoting the movies, he was the marketing.
You really don't know how to use it.
They turned him into the fool, and for a while he played along, because he thought that's what you had to do to survive. But that survival came at a cost. When Holland started advocating for himself, when he wanted control over even basic things like his hair, the pushback was immediate.
So the studio were like, "No, you can't cut your hair like that."
Control over his body, his look, his tone, all of it belonged to the studio. When he finally took a stand and cut his hair anyway, the blowback wasn't subtle. They began icing him out creatively. Even when he earned more leverage after No Way Home's success, the creative inclusion felt performative.
Dear, and they'll say, "No, you can't do that because we're doing that in the new Captain."
Translation: you're invited but don't talk. Meanwhile, Marvel's eyes were always watching. Holland shared that they found out about him raiding a minibar the night before a screen test and confronted him.
Marvel found out about that.
They know all.
Why would a studio investigate a minibar charge? Because Holland wasn't just an actor. He was a commodity, and they guarded him like an asset. He was exhausted. That exhaustion became a brand risk. So instead of helping, Disney leaned harder into the image. Holland wasn't allowed to just be a young actor. He had to be a 24/7 mascot. Marvel didn't want a collaborator. They wanted a living, breathing product line, and Holland was the packaging. Even his smallest victories, like pushing for a Spacek Peter Parker hairstyle, were met with resistance.
I think really helps disconnect the audience from who you are.
Why the fight? Because creative changes, even tiny ones, risked disrupting their meticulously branded version of Spider-Man. Tom Holland, the actor, was an accessory to the IP, but what no one saw was how this constant policing broke him internally. He wasn't allowed to express frustration, wasn't allowed to grow out of the character, wasn't even allowed to get tired, or that would make headlines.
Only a fool would say to you, you should work until you crack. Because if you crack, it's going to take you longer to get back to full fitness.
So he cracked in silence, and when he tried to explain that in the press, when he spoke vulnerably about taking a break, the media, led in part by Disney-fed narratives, turned it into a story about weakness.
It's really disappointing that a young person in my decision who's lucky enough to have the power to say, I'm going to take some time off for myself, gets painted as, something negative.
He wasn't asking for special treatment. He was asking to be human. And the second he stepped outside that corporate expectation, they stepped away. This is what it looks like when a studio builds you up and then discards you the moment you stop smiling for the camera. Holland wasn't just an overworked actor. He was a warning sign, a perfect case study in how Marvel's PR machinery rewards obedience and punishes reality. Tom Holland's final decision to walk away from Spider-Man. Tom Holland didn't quit Spider-Man. He escaped from it, escaped the high-budget dreamscape, escaped the non-stop machine, escaped a studio that was no longer protecting him, but pushing him closer and closer to a line he could no longer walk, because what started as a dream had turned into something else entirely, something toxic, something dangerous, something soul-breaking. And in the end, it wasn't Marvel who let go of Tom Holland. It was Tom Holland who finally let go of them.
Now that I've been afforded that power, I am struggling to figure out what is the right thing to do.
Let's back up. When Holland nished Elming the Crowded Room, a project far removed from the polished sheen of Marvel's superhero catalog, he didn't celebrate. He didn't book his next gig. He didn't even go on vacation. He took a full year and that break wasn't just rest, it was recovery, because something had broken.
It really scared me because I had a really tough time.
While fans and the press speculated about what went wrong, Holland was confronting something deeply personal, the realization that his career had become a machine of sacred, one where sleep, autonomy, peace, and even sobriety were casualties of success. And in the Marvel world, there's no time to pause, no grace to react. The engine keeps running. Holland's choice to step with that ride was more than rebellious. It was radical, but the press didn't treat it that way. Instead, they wrote headlines that screamed burnout, instability, meltdown. They didn't ask why a young star needed time away. They asked, what's wrong with him?
It's really disappointing that a young person in my decision who's lucky enough to have the power to say, I'm going to take some time off for myself, gets painted as, something negative.
The industry had no language for wellness, only red flags and risk assessments. And Marvel said nothing. No statement, no support, no gratitude, just silence. The same machine that had once centered him now moved on without a word. That moment was when the illusion shattered. Holland wasn't safe anymore. Not physically, not emotionally, not publicly. The Disney protection bubble had popped, and when it did, he began to see what the role had really cost him. He was drinking, he was dissociating, he was cracking, and still showing up on set. His fans saw Peter Parker, but he was fighting to remember who Tom Holland was underneath.
I was never a bad drunk or anything like that. When I started, I just couldn't stop.
Marvel didn't intervene. They kept filming, and when Holland took the steps to get better, quitting alcohol, unplugging from social media, protecting his mental space, it was seen not as strength, but as weakness.
I was like, I'm never going to drink again because this is the best version of myself.
This is what makes Tom Holland's exit so significant. He didn't leave because he had a better offer. He didn't walk because of salary disputes. He walked because the system made it impossible to stay and remain human. He walked because he was finally listening to the version of himself that had been drowned out for years.
Only a fool would say to you, you should work until you crack. Because if you crack, it's going to take you longer to get back to full fitness.
And now, for the first time, Holland says no. No to non-stop commitments. No to studios who want his face but not his voice. No to being Spider-Man on their terms. Because Spider-Man might be owned by Marvel, but Tom Holland isn't. But saying no was only the first step. What came next was perhaps even harder. Rebuilding an identity that hadn't been shaped by press junkets, studio executives, or the weight of the Spider-Man suit. Tom Holland began learning how to live without performance. No cameras, no audience, just silence. silence. And that silence, while freeing, was also terrifying. The stillness became his sanctuary. And for once, he didn't have to perform bravery. He could practice it, quietly, privately, off-screen. What came out of that stillness was something Marvel never could have written into a script, an honest version of himself. He began choosing passion projects, ones that aligned with his values, not just his visibility. He said no to roles that demanded too much of his piece and yes to scripts that gave him freedom, not just fame. He also redeemed what success meant. It was no longer measured in opening weekends or Rotten Tomatoes scores. It was how he slept at night, how he spoke to his loved ones, how present he felt in his own life. For someone like Holland, catapulted into stardom before his brain had even fully matured, this wasn't just evolution, it was liberation. And with that power came clarity. He began using his platform not to tease next films or spin studio lines, but to talk about mental health, identity, and self-preservation, especially in an industry that feeds on overexposure. Marvel may still own the character, but Holland owns the story now. It's his voice in interviews, his choice in pacing, his image on his terms. So when people ask, will Tom Holland return to the MCU? The better question is, why would he? Why would he step back into the machine that once cheered his charm but ignored his breaking point? Maybe he won't. Maybe the real plot twist isn't another Spider-Man sequel. Maybe it's the actor behind the mask finally becoming untouchable. Not because he's invincible, but because he's finally whole. Marvel didn't write this ending. Tom Holland did. In walking away, Holland is saying what so many others are too afraid to. I'm done being your product. He's not angry, he's not bitter, he's just done. And in an industry built on illusion, that honesty is more radical than any superhero movie. So what happens next? Will Marvel move on? Absolutely. Will there be another Spider-Man? Undoubtedly. But Tom Holland's version? That story is finished. And in its place, something even more powerful. A young man who chose healing over hype, peace over press, and authenticity over applause. The MCU may have lost its most relatable hero, but Tom Holland, he finally found himself. In the end, this isn't just a story about Tom Holland. It's not just about Spider-Man, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or even the shiny machinery of Disney's billion-dollar franchises. It's a story about what happens to real people inside systems built to exploit their image while ignoring their humanity. Tom Holland's exit wasn't loud. It wasn't tabloid scandal. It was something far more dangerous to a company like Disney. It was honest. He showed up, said everything without rage, and walked away with dignity. That's a move studios can't spin. No tantrums, no contract leaks. Just a man saying, no more. And by doing that, by naming the cracks in the walls he used to decorate with smiles and charm, he exposed an industry's ugliest truths. That young talent is currency, that obedience is expected, that exhaustion is weakness, that vulnerability is bad PR. Tom Holland exposed that the House of Mouse is only a home as long as you're useful and quiet. And when you break under the weight of their expectations, you're discarded, muted, reframed. But Holland didn't let that happen. He chose something no franchise can offer: peace, identity, control. His walkout marks a generational shift, because this wasn't just about protecting himself. It was about creating space for other artists to choose health over hype. He took a risk, turning down Marvel, Sony, and all the glittering promises they carry. He gave up the suit, the spotlight, the Avengers-sized status, and in return, he got his voice back. This expose wasn't written to cancel a studio or pity a star. It was written to illuminate a dangerous pattern, one that chews up young actors and sells their exhaustion as box office gold. Let Holland's story be a warning, not just for Marvel, but for every studio that markets empowerment while demanding silence. Let it be a wake-up call for fans who confuse a superhero's smile with the actor's truth. Because behind every Peter Parker is a person, and Tom Holland, finally, put that person first. So when we ask, will he return? The answer isn't really the point anymore. The better question is, what did it cost him to stay this long? If you enjoyed watching this video, then go ahead and click on any of the cards on your screen for more.
A full-scale rebellion is brewing behind the scenes at Marvel as stars declare war on Disney CEO Bob Iger. Jeremy Renner's explosive rejection of Disney's insult offer is just the beginning.
I'm like, wow, it's going to take me twice the amount of work for half the amount of money.
Meanwhile, other MCU stars are joining the revolution, publicly condemning Iger's leadership.
There's a level of expectation that they have that is just not realistic.
The shocking secret meetings, career-ending threats, and the 3 A-list stars ready to walk away forever. This is the Marvel Civil War they don't want you to know about. The shocking revelation. Jeremy Renner's insulting offer. In early May 2025, during an interview with the High Performance app that was shared on TikTok, Renner made the jaw-dropping claim that Disney had offered him only half of his previous salary for a potential second season of the Disney Plus series Hawkeye. This revelation, documented across multiple entertainment news outlets, including Hindustan Times, IndieWire, and People, came as a particular shock considering Renner's long-standing position as one of the original Avengers and his significant contribution to the Marvel Marvel's cinematic universe over more than a decade. What makes the situation even more remarkable is the timing and context surrounding Disney's offer. As many of you will recall, Jeremy Renner suffered a near-fatal snowplow accident on New Year's Day 2023, resulting in over 35 broken bones and multiple titanium replacements. The actor endured a grueling rehabilitation journey, which he later detailed in his memoir, My Next Breath, released on April 29, 2024. It was against this backdrop of recovery and resilience that Renner claims Disney approached him with the reduced salary offer. In his own words during the high-performance interview, Renner expressed his disbelief at the proposal.
I'm like, I'm sorry. Why? Did you think I'm only half the Jeremy because I got ran over? Maybe that's why you want to pay me half?
The actor's pointed reference to his accident adds a particularly poignant dimension to this dispute, suggesting he felt the offer might have been connected to perceptions about his physical capabilities post-recovery. Adding insult to injury, according to Renner, this halved salary was proposed despite expectations for twice the amount of work and an 8-month time commitment for the second season. The stark contrast between increased workload and decreased compensation left the actor feeling that he had no choice but to decline the offer. It's worth noting that Renner was careful to distinguish between Disney's financial department and Marvel Studios in his criticism. This is not Marvel, mind you. This is like just Disney, not even really Disney. It's just the penny pinchers, the accountants, he clarified. This distinction suggests Renner's issue is specifically with the business side of operations, rather than the creative team with whom he's collaborated for years. The actor's response to the offer was unequivocal. He rejected it outright, telling Disney's financial team to go fly a kite, as he colorfully phrased it. Despite this strong stance, Renner emphasized that his love for the Hawkeye character remains unchanged. I still love the character. I'd still love to do it, but I had to defend myself. What makes this situation particularly interesting is that it's not an isolated incident. Industry observers have noted similar patterns with other actors. John Malkovich, who is set to appear in the Fantastic Four First Steps 2025, revealed he had previously turned down Marvel roles for years due to what he perceived as insufficient pay for the demanding nature of superhero productions. If you're going to hang from a crane in front of a green screen for 6 months, pay me, Malkovich stated, highlighting the physical and time demands these roles often entail. Additionally, reports have suggested that other actors like Hugo Weaving, who played Red Skull, and Carrie Coon have also walked away from Marvel roles over what they considered lowball offers, though specific details of these negotiations remain less public. To fully appreciate the context of Renner's situation, it's important to consider the typical compensation structure for MCU stars. Top earners like Robert Downey Jr. reportedly received around $75 million for Avengers Endgame, while Chris Hemsworth and Scarlett Johansson have commanded approximately $20 million per film in recent years. These figures have been widely reported in industry publications, creating a stark contrast with Renner's reported offer. For his part, Renner's MCU earnings have reportedly ranged from $3 million to $15 million for previous films, making the alleged pay cut for Hawkeye Season 2 all the more dramatic. While exact figures for his Season 1 compensation haven't been publicly disclosed, industry estimates suggest the proposed reduction would represent a significant financial step backward for the actor. This controversy has certainly caught the attention of fans, many of whom have expressed strong support for Renner on social media platforms. On X, formerly Twitter, posts expressing disappointment with Marvel's decision have gained significant traction. One notable comment urged, "Pay that man his money," while another user criticized Marvel directly, "Hey, at Marvel Studios, that's messed up, no? Maybe next time you cannot insult one of your original and longest-lasting cast members in a time when you're not exactly lighting the world on fire." Particularly noteworthy is how fans have connected Renner's situation to his personal challenges following the accident. The sentiment that Disney should be more considerate given his recovery journey has resonated strongly within the fan community, with some expressing that the offer feels particularly callous in light of what the actor has endured. Some fans have even speculated about potential future negotiations, with one commenting, "After the reveal and Thunderbolts, and Haley using her new leverage after Hash Sinners, he'll get paid." This references Haley Steinfeld's rising star power following her success in projects outside the MCU, suggesting her increased leverage might indirectly benefit Renner in future discussions. Disney, for their part, has remained relatively quiet about the specific details of the negotiation. An unnamed Disney insider cited by IndieWire disputed Renner's claims, but notably failed to provide specific details to counter his statements. This lack of transparency has only fueled further speculation about the nature of the offer and Disney's approach to talent compensation more more broadly. The situation raises important questions about how actors are valued in an era of expanding streaming content and changing business models. For a character like Hawkeye, who has been part of the MCU since nearly the beginning, fans might reasonably expect compensation to reflect that long-standing contribution to the franchise's success. Adding another layer to this already complex situation is Renner's potential involvement in future MCU projects beyond Hawkeye. Despite the salary dispute, there have been indications that Renner might return as Hawkeye in Avengers Doomsday, scheduled for release on May 1st, 2026. In an August 2024 interview, Renner hinted at his involvement, stating he is really excited and thinks he'll probably be doing it. This suggests that while the Hawkeye series negotiations have reached an impasse, doors remain open for Renner's return in other capacities. Production on Avengers Doomsday reportedly began in April 2025, with a cast including Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm, Invisible Woman, and Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson, Captain America, among others. So what does the future hold for Hawkeye in the MCU if Jeremy Renner were to permanently step away? The most likely scenario would see Kate Bishop, played by Haley Steinfeld, continuing the Hawkeye legacy. The Hawkeye series already established her as Clint Barton's protege, creating a natural transition path. Marvel could focus on developing new storylines for Kate, possibly incorporating her into projects like Young Avengers, which has been rumored to be in development. Such a transition would align with Marvel's broader strategy of introducing younger heroes and passing mantles to new characters, as seen with Anthony Mackie taking over as Captain America from Chris Evans. However, Renner's departure would unquestionably represent a significant loss for the franchise, given his long tenure and the fan attachment to his portrayal. As we continue to monitor this developing story, it's clear that the relationship between major studios and their talent remains a delicate balance of creative partnership and business negotiation. A pattern emerges: Marvel's history of financial disputes with stars. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, which has generated unprecedented box office success over its nearly two-decade existence, has not been immune to behind-the-scenes financial conflicts. In fact, a careful examination of the franchise's history reveals that Jeremy Renner's situation, while certainly dramatic, follows a well-established pattern of salary disputes that have periodically threatened to disrupt the carefully constructed MCU narrative. Perhaps the most famous or infamous early example of such a dispute involved Terrence Howard, who portrayed James Rhodes, later War Machine, in the original Iron Man 2008. What many casual fans may not realize is that Howard was initially paid more than Robert Downey Jr. for the first film, a reflection of Howard's star power at the time, and the perceived risk associated with casting Downey, who was then in the process of rebuilding his career. However, following the unexpected mega success of Iron Man, Howard's compensation was significantly reduced for future projects, reportedly due to budget reallocations that favored increasing Downey's salary. This dramatic pay cut ultimately led to Howard's departure from the franchise, with Don Cheadle stepping in to take over the role of James Rhodes' War Machine for Iron Man 2 and all subsequent appearances. Howard has been vocal about his frustration with this situation over the years, making it clear that financial considerations played a major role in his exit from what would become one of cinema's most successful franchises. This early instance set a precedent that we would see repeated in various forms throughout the MCU's evolution. Another high-profile dispute that captivated industry attention involved Scarlett Johansson, who had been portraying Natasha Romanoff Black Widow since Iron Man 2. In July 2021, Johansson took the extraordinary step of filing a lawsuit against Disney, alleging breach of contract related to the release strategy for her solo film Black Widow. At the heart of Johansson's claim was the decision to release Black Widow simultaneously in theaters and on Disney Plus Premier Access during the COVID-19 pandemic. The actress alleged this dual release strategy reduced box office revenue, which directly impacted her back-end compensation package that was tied to theatrical performance. Reports suggested Johansson sought approximately $80 million in damages on top of her $20 million base salary for the film. The dispute was ultimately settled in October 2021, with the terms undisclosed but estimated by industry insiders to exceed $40 million. While the specific circumstances of Johansson's case differ from Renner's current situation, both illustrate the ongoing tension between talent compensation and evolving business models in the entertainment industry, particularly as streaming has disrupted traditional revenue streams. Perhaps the most directly comparable precedent to the current Renner situation occurred following the monumental success of The Avengers 2012, which grossed over $1.5 billion worldwide and cemented the MCU as a box office juggernaut. Reports from 2013 indicated that several key Avengers actors, including Chris Hemsworth, Thor, and Chris Evans, Captain America, found themselves in contentious negotiations with Marvel over compensation compensation for future appearances. These actors had signed what were later characterized as ungenerous contracts early in the MCU's development, before its financial success was assured. As the franchise grew exponentially in value, negotiations became increasingly tense. Marvel reportedly offered to triple Chris Hemsworth's contract, though they were not contractually obligated to do so in recognition of his growing importance to the franchise. Robert Downey Jr., who had shrewdly negotiated a percentage of profits rather than just a flat fee for his later appearances, leveraged his position as the MCU's center of gravity to secure increasingly substantial deals, reportedly earning around $75 million for Avengers Endgame, a far cry from the $500,000 he reportedly received for the first Iron Man film. These historical disputes highlight a recurring pattern in Marvel's approach to talent compensation. Initial contracts tend to favor the studio, with renegotiations becoming necessary as the franchise's success grows and actors gain leverage. The frequency of these disputes suggests a systematic approach to talent management that prioritizes controlling costs even as the overall franchise generates extraordinary revenues. But financial tensions within the MCU extend beyond just the major stars. Recent controversies have involved actors who, while not headlining their own films, have played crucial supporting roles in the franchise. For instance, reports emerged in 2025 that Carrie Coon had declined to return to the MCU over a salary dispute, though specific details remained private. Similarly, Hugo Weaving, who memorably portrayed the Red Skull in Captain America: The First Avenger, did not return for subsequent appearances, with financial considerations reportedly playing a role in that decision. The situation becomes even more complex when examining how Marvel's strategy has evolved in more recent phases of the MCU. Industry reports suggest that for Phase 4 and beyond, Marvel aimed to decrease tentpole actor salaries, part of a broader strategy emphasizing character brands rather than star power. This approach reportedly resulted in lower salaries for actors like Salma Hayek, Angelina Jolie, and Richard Madden compared to what earlier MCU stars had commanded at similar points in their tenure. This strategic shift appears to reflect Disney's growing confidence in the Marvel brand itself, rather than the individual actors portraying the characters. While this might make financial sense from a corporate perspective, it risks alienating the very talents who bring these beloved characters to life, as we've seen with Renner's public rebuke of what he perceived as an inadequate offer. The disparity in compensation among MCU actors has also drawn increasing attention from fans and industry observers. For example, while Robert Downey Jr. earned approximately $75 million for Avengers Endgame, Chris Evans reportedly made around $20 million, and Chadwick Boseman earned approximately $2 million for Black Panther, a film that grossed over $1.3 billion worldwide. These significant gaps raise questions about equity and compensation, particularly when considering factors such as screen time, character importance, and contribution to the franchise's overall success. It's worth noting that some MCU actors have publicly acknowledged the complex nature of these negotiations without expressing outright dissatisfaction. Benedict Cumberbatch, who portrays Doctor Strange, has spoken about the business aspects of joining such a massive franchise while maintaining that he feels fairly compensated. Similarly, Paul Bettany, Vision, has discussed the evolution of his contract from a voice role as Jarvis to a full character with increased compensation, illustrating the potential for positive growth within the system. However, as evidenced by Jeremy Renner's recent statements, not all actors feel that their compensation has evolved appropriately with their contribution to the franchise. His rejection of what he described as an insult offer for Hawkeye Season 2 suggests that despite Disney's immense resources, there remains a tension between maximizing profitability and ensuring talent feels valued appropriately. This tension becomes particularly pronounced when considering the overall financial success of the MCU. As of 2025, the franchise has generated over $30 billion in global box office revenue, not including merchandise sales, theme park attractions, and the substantial value added to Disney's streaming platform. Against this backdrop of extraordinary financial success, offers that actors perceive as inadequate can appear particularly egregious. But financial disputes aren't the only area where Disney and its Marvel stars have found themselves at odds. In recent years, several MCU actors have publicly expressed disagreement with Disney CEO Bob Iger on various issues, from labor disputes to creative decisions. These conflicts add another dimension to the complex relationship between the studio and its talent roster. One notable example is Tatiana Maslany, who portrayed She-Hulk in the Disney Plus series of the same name. During the 2023 writers and actors strikes, Maslany criticized Iger as being completely out of touch with the workers who create Disney's content. She particularly highlighted the wealth disparity, pointing out that Disney's prosperity was not adequately shared with crew, cast, and writers. Her comments were part of a broader industry backlash against Iger's statement statements during the labor disputes, which many perceived as dismissive of striking workers' concerns. Similarly, Sean Gunn, who plays Kraglin and serves as the on-set reference for Rocket in the Guardians of the Galaxy films, publicly criticized Iger's remarks during the strikes. Speaking from the picket lines, Gunn directly addressed the massive pay disparity within Disney, stating, "I think when Bob Iger talks about what a shame it is, he needs to remember that in the 1980s, CEOs like him made 30 times more than what the lowest worker was making. Now Bob Iger makes 400 times what his lowest worker is, and I think that's shame, Bob." Even Iman Vellani, star of The Marvels, has indirectly expressed disagreement with Iger. When asked about her film's disappointing box office performance, Vellani shifted responsibility to the CEO, stating simply, "That's for Bob Iger," and emphasizing that the results had nothing to do with me. While less confrontational than the comments from Maslany or Gunn, Vellani's statement nonetheless reflected a willingness to publicly distance herself from corporate disappointments and place accountability at the executive level. These examples demonstrate that financial disputes like Renner's exist within a broader context of tensions between Disney leadership and Marvel talent. The relationship between the studio and its stars appears increasingly strained across multiple dimensions, from compensation to broader industry issues like labor rights and creative direction. Perhaps most tellingly, even Bob Iger himself has acknowledged shortcomings in Marvel's recent trajectory. The bigger picture: Disney CEO Bob Iger and the future of the MCU. Bob Iger, who returned as Disney's CEO in November 2022 after previously serving from 2005 to 2020, has been a transformative figure in the company's history. Under his initial tenure, Disney acquired Pixar 2006, Marvel Entertainment 2009, Lucasfilm 2012, and 21st Century Fox 2019, dramatically expanding the company's intellectual property portfolio and establishing its dominant position in the entertainment industry. Since his return in late 2022, Iger has focused on reorganizing Disney into three branches: Disney Entertainment, Parks, Experiences, and Products, and ESPN. His leadership has been particularly focused on transforming Disney's streaming business and restoring creativity at the company's core goals that directly impact Marvel Studios' operations and output. However, Iger's leadership style and public comments have occasionally put him at odds with talent, particularly during periods of industry unrest. A prime example of this tension emerged during the 2023 Writers Guild of America, WGA, and Screen Actors Guild American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, SAG-AFTRA, strikes, when Iger made comments that many industry professionals, including Marvel stars, found dismissive of legitimate concerns. In a particularly notable interview, Iger described the strikes as very disturbing and characterized the expectations of writers and actors as just not realistic. Let's examine his exact words.
Speaking of content, we're in the midst of a writer's strike, and very likely it would seem to have a actor's strike. How is that going to impact things, and what are your expectations there?
Well, I think it's very disturbing to me. We've talked about disruptive forces on this business and all the challenges we're facing and the recovery from COVID, which is ongoing. It's not completely back. This is the worst time in the world to add to that disruption.
And when directly asked if the writers and actors were not being realistic, Iger responded affirmatively.
So they're not being realistic?
No, they're not.
Why not?
I can't answer that question. I respect their right and their desire to get as much as they possibly can in compensation for their people. I completely respect that. I've been around long enough to understand that dynamic and to appreciate it. But you also have to be realistic about the business environment and what this business can deliver.
These comments sparked immediate backlash from many in the entertainment industry, including several Marvel stars. As mentioned earlier, Tatiana Maslany, who portrays She-Hulk, criticized Iger as completely out of touch with the workers who create Disney's content, while Sean Gunn highlighted the 400-to-1 pay disparity between Iger and Disney's lowest paid workers. The strikes eventually concluded with new agreements that addressed many of the union's concerns, including protections against AI usage and improved streaming residuals. However, Iger's comments during this period created lasting tension between Disney leadership and the creative community, including many Marvel actors who participated in the strikes. This backdrop of labor disputes provides important context for understanding Jeremy Renner's salary negotiation. While Renner's situation predates the 2023 strikes, it reflects similar concerns about fair compensation in an evolving entertainment landscape. Renner specifically pointed to Disney's penny pinchers rather than Marvel Studios' studios as the source of his frustration, suggesting that financial decisions at the corporate level are creating friction with talent. Beyond labor disputes, Iger has also made comments about Marvel's content strategy that have raised eyebrows among fans and industry observers. In December 2023, he suggested that the substance of MCU stories was partly to blame for box office struggles, particularly emphasizing what he perceived as too much focus on messages rather than entertainment. These comments drew criticism from creative figures like Peter Ramsey, co-director of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, who defended the Marvels against Iger's implications. Fan discussions on platforms like Reddit also pushed back against Iger's framing, with many arguing that quality storytelling rather than ideological messaging was the primary concern for audiences. More recently, in February 2024, Iger outlined a plan to focus on larger MCU franchises as a strategy to save the superhero universe, indicating a potential shift toward more established characters and properties. This direction might have implications for newer characters and more experimental projects, potentially affecting the MCU's diversity of storytelling. Against this backdrop of strategic shifts and public statements, Disney's offer to Jeremy Renner takes on additional significance. Offering half the previous salary to an original Avenger could be interpreted as part of a broader strategy to reduce talent costs, particularly for Disney Plus productions. If true, this would align with reports that Marvel has been aiming to decrease tentpole actor salaries in Phase 4 and beyond. But while cost control might make sense from a pure business perspective, it risks alienating the very talent that has made the MCU successful. Fan reactions to Renner's revelation have been overwhelmingly supportive of the actor, with many expressing disappointment in Disney's approach. Comments on social media posts reporting the dispute show strong sentiment in Renner's favor, with users urging Disney to pay that man his money and criticizing the studio for what they perceive as disrespect toward an original Avenger. The timing of the offer is particularly notable given Renner's recovery from his near-fatal accident. Many fans have pointed out that offering a reduced salary to an actor who has endured significant physical trauma seems especially tone-deaf. As one ex-user commented, disappointing that Disney won't pay an OG Avenger to return, especially after what he's gone through to get back to acting. This brings us to the crucial question: what could these disputes mean for the future of the MCU? Several potential impacts are worth considering. First, there's the immediate question of Hawkeye's future in the franchise. If Jeremy Renner permanently steps away due to compensation disagreements, the most likely scenario would see Kate Bishop, Haley Steinfeld, continuing the Hawkeye legacy. The Disney Plus series already established her as Clint Barton's protege, creating a natural transition. Marvel could focus on developing new storylines for Kate, possibly incorporating her into projects like Young Avengers, which has been rumored to be in development. Such a transition would align with Marvel's broader strategy of introducing younger heroes and passing mantles to new characters, as seen with Anthony Mackie taking over as Captain America from Chris Evans. However, Renner's departure would unquestionably represent a significant loss for the franchise, given his long tenure and the fan attachment to his portrayal. If Renner were to leave, Marvel would miss his experience and depth as an actor who has portrayed Hawkeye for over a decade. His depiction of Clint Barton as a relatable, grounded hero with a family life has added valuable contrast to the more fantastical elements of the MCU. Additionally, his established chemistry with other Avengers actors has contributed significantly to the ensemble dynamic that has been central to the franchise's success. However, there are indications that despite the Hawkeye series dispute, Renner may still be involved in other MCU projects. As mentioned earlier, he has hinted at appearing in Avengers Doomsday, scheduled for release on May 1st, 2026. This suggests that while television negotiations have reached an impasse, his character might continue to appear in theatrical releases. Beyond the specific issue of Hawkeye's future, these disputes highlight broader challenges facing the MCU as it navigates its second decade. The franchise is currently in a period of transition, with many original stars having departed or taking on reduced roles. This creates a delicate balance between honoring legacy characters and establishing new ones, a balance that could be disrupted by contentious salary negotiations with veteran actors. For more content like this, click on the videos showing on your screen now.